disconnected. Welcome to Friday. First bit, just got to reconnect the TrackMan, so bear with me one moment. I hope everyone's had a good week. Just got to do the switch off and back on trick. So so today, another Friday live. Thank you for joining us. This proves it's live. So, and hopefully starting to get a bit better weather. Been busy weekend. Going to have a look at one of the things I wanted to run through today. There's been a lot of move towards very lightweight shafts and more lightweight shaft, ultra lightweight shaft options out there. So going to run through 4 of them today. We'll go through each model as we run through, but go from the Autoflex, which is clearly visible, TPT, Mitsubishi and Oban. For those who want to know a little bit more about what they can expect from them, so not necessarily who it's going to suit or not suit, but what the differences are and some of the structures that change. But to give a little bit of insight into why they maybe perform a particular way, but feel very, very differently between the models. Hopefully Stuart Cartwright, our coach, is going to join us for a little bit as well. And then generally, as with other Friday Lives, we'll open it out. Any questions, just let us know. Anything you want me to go over. If there's time and we're able to do it, then I'll, if it's hitting some product and explaining a few bits, then please just let us know and look forward to doing it. I'm just going to say reset the TrackMan up now. Hopefully it'll behave itself. I'm going to have to close down and reopen up the software. So,
whilst we are, happy Friday everyone, whilst we are waiting for Simon to do that and the software to reload, thanks for joining us. Hi guys, quick question about counterbalance shafts. What's the point in them and what sort of player are they designed for?
So the point of counterbalance, so any shaft has a dominant balance point. For any shaft, the weight and the balance is about tuning how the shaft moves into how the player moves and getting them to complement one another. So how you develop your speed means you're going to suit a tip balance shaft or a counterbalance shaft. So counterbalance is, I guess apt to use this one, where the balance point is more towards the handle end. So that means actually, by pulling the balance up towards the grip end, it takes less energy to get the club head tracking through. The more you put weight in the bottom end, the more that club head drops in, so it tends to suit someone who pulls on the handle and hits with the hands a little bit more. So what counterbalance does is it allows someone who's more of a body rotation player and a quieter arm swinger, so that the sort of tour player you'd look at be someone like Brandt Snedeker, very dead arms, all body rotation. If he played tip heavy, the club's dropping in behind, he's going to miss it left, right all day. That's why he plays a graphite in his irons. So they suit someone who's not a heavy puller on the handle, heavily arm dominant in the main. But the purpose of it is literally just to give every golfer out there an option of shaft that works for them. It doesn't really necessarily stiffen the butt section of the shaft. It can do if like the Ventus TR has a stiffer, another material in the handle to stiffen it up, and that actually has also had the knock-on effect of bringing the balance point up the shaft a little bit, so it can stiffen the shaft up, but it's literally just shifting the weight around to suit how the player moves.
Sorry, I keep forgetting to turn my microphone on. Just a quick thank you to all the very kind messages for following my workshop live. Only one comment, somebody said that when I talk, my top lip looks like Elvis, but I'm telling you, I was all shook up. I was all shook up.
The pun had to get in there somewhere, doesn't it? Thankfully, tech is now back up and working.
How do you identify weight of a driver shaft for someone in a fit, 65 versus 75, etc.?
So, that's a big difference. So what you're going to notice is, I'll grab an iron just to, what you're going to notice when the club gets heavy, when the dead weight of the shaft gets heavy, as you start down, as the player starts, it's almost like chaining it to the wall. The hips will get through the ball, club's going to get behind. So you're going to tend to see a little bit of a stand up out of it, a little bit of loss of posture. But once it gets behind, it's a case of pull on the handle, open face, flip it, close face. You tend to get a little bit of that sort of effect. When the weight's better, you're going to see arms, body, club synced up more. So it looks a cleaner, simpler motion when the weight's better. But too heavy, club will get stuck behind. Too light, and almost kind of the club gets through the shot, gets out ahead of the player a little bit more, and they tend to have to back off it or quieten off to make it work. So the better the weight is, the more it allows a player to just move. So ultimately, the movement comes, they stay balanced. That's a big key. And then the better weight of club allows a player to just rotate through and finish stable and balanced. And it's just going to look a simpler move, ultimately. That was a horrible swing. It did what the swing did, sadly, unfortunately. Stuart's down here now. Did you want to come in at the beginning and then I'll move on to the shafts? Yeah.
Sure,
Stuart has to go and coach before I finish this. So welcome back.
I know.
Stuart's had the joy of being with us in Greece and then last week in Portugal for one of your boot camps.
I know. Yeah.
That's an intense couple of weeks.
Well, the Costa Navarino trip was fantastic, wasn't it? I don't think we could have predicted it going as well as it did. I mean, my team...
We'd have hoped. Well, no, actually, no, it couldn't have gone any better.
No, from my team losing perspective. But we'd have hoped it had gone as well as it did. But I don't think, there was 36 golfers and you've got a new resort. We've gone out there for a recce. Yeah. But you still are a bit concerned when you're taking a decent sized group out, making sure everything... Costa Navarino from start to finish, they were impeccable, weren't they? And the golf courses were, well, dreams are made of the quality.
I've been asked which one my favourite was when I got back, and
I'm the hills.
I'm not sure. The turf on the hills suits the way I play a little bit firmer, so I kind of like that a bit more. Yeah. I feel like I need to give the other two a chance, knowing them. I think you need to know those greens are more exaggerated. 100%. You need to know where to miss them. And I think Not I didn't enjoy them. I think I'd enjoy them and enjoy the challenge a little bit more knowing them next time. And just like the Bay, I think your first round out, getting used to the turf.
Yeah. Slopey greens, right?
Just kind of, I think I'd particularly want to give that one a second chance. But I found it hard. If it is a favourite, it's a minor call between them. I thought they were great fun. Yeah. And look forward to playing the Olympic next time.
Yeah. I mean, I've run a few big trips as yourself, Sav. I always think about the logistics. I mean, we're there as one group, and there's a few groups kicking around as well. But to be able to stand on the range and have your clubs there, and then go play your 18 holes, and they're all in your buggies, and then you just leave them in the buggies, and then we had some lunch, and then we went and did the shootouts and the clinics, and then the clubs were lined up there for us, and then we left them there, and then they were on the buggies the next day at the next resort. I think that was...
From our point of view, that was massive, wasn't it? Just imagine having to organise the bags as well as,
minefield, bags going missing and all sorts, but it was faultless, and the hotel and the food was fantastic, wasn't it? The restaurants that we dined in.
Amazing, amazing. I think in your boot camp trips that you do, I mean, that was 6, I think you had on. Was it 6 or 7?
6 of us in total, five AMs and me. Yeah, we go out, we play 3 rounds of golf. I coached them for 10 hours over the 4 days. It's really nice because I get to play with everyone. So I play the front 9 with one group and then drop back and play the front 9 and swap around. And it's great to see people on course, which is just not the same as
revealing.
Here. It's like, how on earth?
Greater fallibilities, of course.
How on earth do you shoot 85 and then you swing it like that? And it's okay, you can't get it up and down from 30 yards.
You would have found the middle part of all 3 of my rounds fascinating to see your mental frailty.
I think as good players, when you don't play as much, I think you can. That comes all too easy, the mental frailty, because you're not. You can. One thing standing there hitting it on a mat and whipping it down there and doing a demo, but standing there on grass with a few people hanging around, and then you get a good score going.
That's
just
a killer.
Not. It's just not that easy.
How do you structure? Going back to your boot camps, how do you structure kind of balancing the amount of kind of coaching on each bit of the game? Obviously, there for a few days. Do you balance that across the days and the play? How do you make that work without destroying people's technique?
And that's the thing, right? We do a lot of range work, but hitting off of grass. Well, that in itself is a bit of a minefield because not many people hit off grass. That is a different type of practice. But I don't get too involved in heavy duty maintenance. Most people I'm helping anyway that are there. Well, everyone that I'm helping. So we're fine tuning what we're doing at home, but it gives us a real opportunity to do work on strategy, short game work. I set up stations, so we'll spend 10 minutes on a station. I'll have my TrackMan there. We have a short game station. We have a bunker station. We have a putting station, and then they just rotate around, and so everyone gets a flavour of all of the various ingredients. And then we have some on-course games for strategy and being able to test them from 30 yards, 100 yards, and just see how that all starts to pan out. And then with me being on the golf course and just kind of sitting back and watching, and people say, well, help me. Well, I'm, at the moment, I'm just watching. I'm just going to let you do your thing. And so it's really great. But so by the end of the week, after hitting 10 hours worth of golf balls on the range, 3 rounds of golf, and we've talked golf morning, noon and night, which is great fun because you get to know people off the golf course and have some nice candid chats. They're great. Honestly, I absolutely love them because it's a really good way of getting to know people that you've helped for a little while, but also seeing them in action. And that's for me. That's taking all the great stuff we do here with the equipment, the fitness, media work, physically, and then putting it in to a golf course, and then they walking off and going, that's why I can't shoot, break 80 or can't break 90 or whatever it is. And it's not just for good players, it's for people that are learning the game, up from 28 down, 36 down. But they're great fun. Great fun.
And I think and I found this going out to Greece. I've always found it going. I've been lucky to play in the States and Europe and Portugal and now Greece. I hadn't played in Greece before. From your point, what advice would you give people who go and play somewhere, different continent, different turf types, different bunkers? Is there anything that you would advise people to do to acclimatise? Yeah, that was right. Acclimatise to that, because obviously we've got a very particular and sometimes actually quite a simple turf type to play off here. And then you go to like Bermuda grass or the much softer turfs. What's the best way of, or would you have any advice on how to acclimatise?
Yeah, I think whenever you get off a plane into a different country, I think the further away you go from home, the more you need to appreciate how different it's going to be.
Yeah.
So you sit on a plane for 2 hours, it's going to have less impact than if it was for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Understand that. And at that point, sort of manage your expectations, because you are about to play the first round of golf of your trip and expect to play exactly the same as you did 2 days ago around your home golf course. I think firstly is really, really important. And then secondly, a really easy tip is to get your golf club, and I'll grab a club.
Do you want a wedge or anything? Or
yeah, just any club really. And when you get on the practice ground, just if you're practicing off of grass, just run the club in 2 different directions and just feel how the grass reacts. If the club kind of bounces like that in one direction and does nothing in the opposite, you know you're going to experience some decent grain that week. And at that point, you need to be way more proficient at reading the lie, particularly short game shots, not so much long shots, but short game shots and putts. And I think once you...
Because you did that when we were out in Greece, and that was the amount of people when you did that demo with the wedge, and it literally catched and caught and bounced. Still went, oh wow, that explains why I've duffed every chip this week so far.
And we talked about it with Roger, played on tour for many years. So you hit a ball over the back of a green on tour, and all of the players have walked off the back of the green, they've walked up through the ropes between the gallery, and of course all of the grass has leant over. Well, if you hit your ball on that part, and now you're trying to chip back, you might have a 5-6 inch length of grass that's all been laid over, and now you've got to chip back into it, and that's just an exaggerated part. Though that's the thing that people don't manage enough. The difference in grasses, and understand just there's a difference as soon as you get off of a plane and play in a different country. As I say, further you go, the more allowances you've got to go. And always give 1 round of golf, throw it away. Just play a round of golf, whatever you score, don't let it ruin your week. Just understand that's my acclimatisation. Then go and hit some balls on the range. Now you're in and off you go. So I think that's the best way to manage a golf trip.
Well, you could say make sure you spend some time chipping and playing bunks.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is you could completely destroy yourself before going on a golf course. So I would probably go and do stuff around the short game area, green, just to, as you say, to get a feel for the different turfs and how it grabs the club, and hope I find a way of making it work before I step on the course.
The bounce factor, as well. Well, let's talk about Monday night. Monday nights. We haven't really
to next week.
We haven't really advertised that as yet.
No, we talked about it last.
No, not
last
yet. We
time,
briefly mentioned it, but
live and exclusive.
It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, Monday
Topical.
nights.
Yeah. So
Topical,
Friday switching to Monday. So this slot will switch to a Monday at 6 o'clock. Yeah. So
you and myself.
The 2 of us.
Yeah, every week.
6 to 7 every Monday, and James.
If you have to be here, go on then.
Yeah, the voice of reason.
I've got my own little thumbnail now.
Have you?
Yeah. She has an identity. It's not just a voice. Not just a voice anymore. Yeah.
No, so Monday nights are going to be really exciting for us. Yeah,
And thanks for the feedback on times and for anyone who sort of fed back and said, no, that'd be a better time. Thanks for that.
Yeah, so 6 o'clock, and we're going to get some guests on. We're close to closing out a guest for Monday night who you see on TV quite a bit.
Yeah.
So hopefully they are going to be in on Monday.
Yeah.
We're just going to hopefully lock that in, and then we'll advertise it. But it'd be nice to just talk about golf of the weekend that's just gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's coming up, new products, old products, what you're seeing from a fitting perspective, and just chewing the cud of golf, right? Hit some shots, talk a bit about
As I
coaching.
say, the questions that everyone sends in every week, really grateful for, and keep those coming, because that's something that there's only so much that we'll think about, and any questions if it's relating to, say, what's gone on the weekend or the week before or coming up, especially with hopefully some of the people will get in as well. That'd be real interesting content, hopefully.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, I'm going to slide off and have my lunch.
Not going abroad again between now and Monday?
No, well, I might top the tan up with a little spray tan on later on, but other than that, it'll be just the same.
Cool.
All
Great
right.
to see you as always.
Thank you
Looking
very
forward
much.
to Monday. Thank you
me
for
too.
your valuable input.
Always a pleasure.
And which I need more of soon. But
Anytime.
Yeah,
All
we'll
right.
see you
Enjoy.
soon.
Thanks, everyone.
So in case any questions are coming whilst we're doing that, I'll do the driver shafts now in case there's anything in particular that came in. That's
There's a few questions here. Let's start with Aidan. Does James find Arcos sensor grips change balance? I weighed one from a Cobra driver and it was like 65 grams. Well, I'll let Simon answer the effects of...
Yeah,
but in the workshop, yes, we do. So with somebody that wants to play with a grip with Arcos built in, we have to ask the question, is somebody going to stay with an Arcos grip with it built in, or are they going to switch out to potentially a normal grip? So that's got to be a question. Do we build the build spec to the fitter's specified length, or do we factor that in? But I'll let Simon...
Yeah, the Arcos bit has, so every grip's got a bit of a grip cap where the kind of structure of the grip ends, and there's a little bit of rubber at the top as a sort of a buffer there, sort of a butt end. But the Arcos has another quarter inch, would you say? About
3/8 easily.
About a quarter, 3/8 of an inch that the sensor then goes into. And this is the built-in Arcos rather than the screwed-in one. So there are two effects of that. One is that, we would always build to a built shaft length, partly because different grips have different grip caps on them as well. So a multi-compound, not necessarily just a multi-compound, but a multi-material grip, they've got to bond together somewhere, and there's normally a section at the top that creates that kind of root point. So they tend to have a slightly thicker cap at the top. But with the Arcos, it's a little bit bigger. So actually, the base weight difference isn't huge from the Arcos sensor itself, but you're adding rubber at the top, you're adding the sensor at the top. Now, the key thing with the Arcos, where we would build them to, is so that the Arcos is effectively a slight extension off the top of the club. So we would always say, for example, if that white line there was the base of the Arcos sensor, we would always say grip below it, because essentially that is the top of any other club. And then the Arcos sits above your hand. That's going to minimize the effects of the Arcos sensor and the weight on the club and the setup of the club, swing weight, things like that. So that's a key thing, but then also means once the club's built with an Arcos grip, it then means that we can, if you decide you don't want to use them in the future, that we can revert to a standard grip and the club still plays the same, as long as the grip type and the weight stay the same. So the second part of the question, which was about grip weight, that can have a massive effect. So one of the things that we're seeing more and more, there are more grip types, more construction types, more material kind of combinations being used, but particularly when you're going from a standard size to a mid-size, so there are a handful of grips that stay within 2 or 3 grams of in a mid-size to their standard size weight. So a Golf Pride Tour Velvet or the Tour Velvet 360 are a 50 to 53 gram standard weight, standard size, and the mid-size is sort of 55, 56. So those few grams don't change it too much. The Z cord, that stays similar kind of weight progression. The Lank and the Sona Plus series, they sit again same kind of 3 or 4 gram weight difference. I'm trying to think there's one other. Some of the winds are very light. The pure grips don't change very much apart from the white ones. So there are a handful that you can go up in size and it not affect the weight of the grip. But if it's a multi-compound, if it's a Lambkin crossline, if it is a CP2 series Golf Pride, the standard size are 52, 53 grams, and you go to 60 to 64 grams in the mid-size. That 10 grams is a big difference. If we were to say 10 grams difference in a shaft, that's a massive change. And if you're adding weight to the grip end, then to keep the swing weight the same, you've got to add weight to the head end. So what you're doing is you're adding, say for the ease of argument, 10 grams in the grip, you've got to add another 3 or 4 in the club head end to get the swing weight back. You've put best part of 15 grams on the club. That will affect the way the club performs. So it's something that in fittings, if someone's looking at a mid-size, the type of grip we're incorporating more and more and more into our testing, because that can be the difference between a test club with a standard Tor Velvet mid-size on, working really well, and then going to say the +4 version or a multi-compound mid-size without having tested it, and the club just not working. So grip weight has a massive effect on performance and really, really needs to be thought about.
Okay,
So quite a long answer to that, but it's a really important part of the club.
Let's just take one more question before we go into the testing. Nick Luton, hi guys. What are your thoughts regarding modern day iron fittings being based purely around a 7-iron?
There's no issue at all. I think we base it around currently a 6-iron, but that's partly as the lofts have developed. That's where they've moved to a 7-iron. The reason that's absolutely fine is because in 95% of shafts, there's a weight progression through the shafts and the heads. And if you're playing from a 4-iron to a pitch wedge, they're full swing clubs. So you're rarely playing. You might play knockdown shots, things, but they're not what we call sort of finesse swings. So actually, the structure of the swing and the way you deliver the club, very, very slightly develops through. But that's more the intensity and the speed goes up as you're trying to hit it further with a 5-iron to a 9-iron. But functionally, the way you develop that speed and the way you move stays the same. So you actually don't need to do 4-iron, 7-iron pitch wedge testing within a fitting, because actually all you're doing is adding more and more and more swings that someone's got to hit. And if you can judge based around the mid-iron where the launch and the spin profile of the heads are, you can extrapolate that out a couple of clubs down into a long iron and see where that spin profile is going to go, and know whether the head style and the forgiveness and the flight is enough to play that into be it a 6-iron, a 5-iron, a 4-iron, and still get effective flight. So I think there are some who would argue that you do need to from a gapping point of view, but realistically, unless you're massively changing head style with a split set, the only thing that needs to change is the loft gapping and the blending, which you can do with a good amount of club heads comfortably post-build, just to make sure the distances track out, than having to add extra swings in a 4-iron or a pitch wedge, which most players don't have in the fitting. You would generally get in an iron fitting, get up to 60 or 70 swings. Now that's getting close to most people's maximum amount of swings anyway. In a full bag, we'd often get close to 100, which is right on the top limit. So if you're trying to add even more swings, testing out long, short irons, things, you're just going to swing someone out. But actually, from a practical point of view, you do not need to be hitting effectively the full range of iron heads to gauge whether the club is suitable, the flight's suitable, and the performance is suitable.
Cool. Please
My
do
opinion.
keep sending your questions in. If we go through to doing some shaft testing now.
Let's do the shaft testing, yeah.
Got all your questions here, so I can see them all coming through. We will come back to them, but let's get you.
We'll get on to
some products.
So lightweight shafts have become far more available. There are more options out there. The material quality that is now available. I guess material quality has always been available to a major extent. It's just the cost effectiveness has not been there, or potentially the consumer's desire to pay as much for a lightweight shaft is now higher than it has been before. Certainly during the lockdowns, the Autoflex became got a lot of volume and a lot of momentum based on some of the reviews that were out there, and that's actually made, I think kicked a few of the other brands into, if they would have been developing the lightweight shafts, but to go there a little bit more, and so we're seeing a few more come out now. So wanted to talk through a few of the shafts that are down at those sort of mid 40s, and actually one sub 40 gram. Why they perform the way they do, some of the material consistencies and how they design, but also what you can expect from the field point of view. Is a massive variation in these based on how they're designed to perform. So I'm going to run through a few of them and then hit a few of them and just describe the feel differences and the performance differences and why you're going to see certain differences out of them, but not necessarily, I wouldn't be able to say whether one's going to work for someone or not, but just why they're going to be different. So I thought I'd start with the one that everyone's, it looks like I've dressed for the occasion today, but the one that everyone's going to recognise in the Auto Flex, obviously very, very recognisable from the colour point of view. This one's been out a few years now, and the main principle of the Auto Flex is obviously the hidden career technology, which to date I've not known anyone who can tell me exactly what it is, but essentially good grade materials, because you're not going to get this softer flexor shaft without failures, without it being good materials, and it's the flex of the shaft that's really been where the focus is on this one. It's a much softer flex than most players would ever have experienced on course. If I were to sort of waggle that around, the old test that people do leaning on the top of it, which actually is probably one of the worst gauges of flex there is, but you can see how much movement, how easily it bends. There's lots of movement in the shaft. It's designed to be very flexible. It's not necessarily the lightest shaft out there. It's around the 50 gram mark on this one, but slightly counterbalanced, to go back to one of the points earlier. So designed to be played a little bit longer than, I would say, standard, more of a 45.5 inch length. That's where they would go a little bit longer. The counterbalance helps to stop it getting too head heavy, but very soft. So I'll start with this one. I think a lot of the time with these shafts, particularly the ones that are designed to play softer, the feel is what is going to determine how comfortable you are with it or not. I would say with the very soft flexes of shafts like this, you have to pretty much ignore what it feels like. You have to just move through the feel, because that's the bit that one of the videos we've done previously between two shafts of the same weight but very different flexes. Actually what we found is once you move through the shaft, through the swing, and kind of ignore what the shaft feels like, the player reacts to the feel and therefore either backs off it or feels like you've got to hit it hard to get the most out of it. But actually quite often flex alone, unless you go very wide. If there are some knock-on effects that are going very soft on flex, it won't affect the dispersion. It's more whether you commit to the swing and keep moving through it or not. So slightly counterbalanced shaft. These ones we've got at 45.5. So swing weight of this one's D3.5. I've pre-measured these before anyone else, so I could, rather than having to go through too many processes. So if you were to take that down a ½ inch to 45, where the other shafts are, be around D1, just under D1.
So very quickly,
so the first thing anyone...
There is a kind of a related question here, which is a good time to answer. Mike T says, can increased driver length to 46 inches increase club speed, and can most amateurs get used to the extra length?
Afternoon, Mike. So in principle, all else being equal, yes, longer shaft length equals more club speed. The flip of that is most amateurs could get used to the feel of the length, but are going to suffer from a dispersion point of view. So the reason why the average length of driver on tour is 44.5 is not because they're trying to constrict distance, it's because it optimizes strike. And if you optimize strike, you optimize ball speed, you optimize flight, and the 1 or 2 mile an hour gain that going ½ an inch longer might give you from a club speed point of view can be quickly frittered away by missing contact. You lose spin efficiency and you lose ball speed. So it's about finding a balance between maximizing the speed you've got but optimizing strike and dispersion, because there's no point having more speed if you're going to hit it in the rough all day. And that's where, for amateurs, 45.5, 46 inch driver shafts, they're just too long. Finding contact suddenly becomes very hard. I'm just going to make sure the screen's stay on. So that's why you do not see tour players, unless they're one of the world's best ball strikers like Will Zalatoris, moved to 45.5 inches a year and a half ago. He can cope with it, but he's one of the best players on the planet. So that's something really to bear in mind. So autoflex wise, one of the first things anyone's going to notice picking it up is you waggle it and there's a lot of movement in the shaft, but we know that's what it's designed for. So it's when you take the club away, it's almost like the head lags behind a little bit, and so that can be a little disconcerting, but the key thing there, as I said, is just to try to ignore it and just move through that. So I got that a little bit toey, but you have to, it's impossible to not notice the feeling of the movement in the shaft, but if you can ignore it, then you're not going to react to it and back off it and steer it. So I kind of stalled out a bit on it there and waited for it. So that was me reacting to it a bit, having just said just swing through it. I think one of the things when you go very soft on shaft, the one thing it does do, it doesn't necessarily open or close the face massively, but it does, the head works underneath more, so you get a higher launch. So one of the things anyone who's tested one of these shafts will find is that you've got to go lower loft or a lower spin head to stop the ball flaring up. That was hit pretty well. So I've got the Cobra, the LS under this, and so weight low and forward is a very low spin head design. So you can see with that, 14 launch, 2.5 on spin. Because of the nature of the shafts, I'm just reining my swing back a little bit. I'm not going full bore on these. But the main sensation from this is just a lot of movement in the shaft. Ultimately, the reason they designed this one is the principle of lighter weight, slight counterbalance. The theory of softer flex is to create more club speed. Now, the soft flex on its own doesn't necessarily do that, but what will do that is potentially that sort of slightly counterbalance and the relatively lightweight, allowing you to rotate quickly and collect the ball from it. The flip of it is that for a lot of players, it does tend to pop the flight up a little bit too much, or being a bit counterbalanced, you can lose the bottom end and lose control. But so the most noticeable thing on that shaft for me is obviously the colour, but you have to ignore how it feels. It's actually a fairly solid feel at impact. It's not at strike, it's not the best way of describing it. We all describe feel differently, but it actually has quite a solid sensation at contact. So it doesn't feel kind of floppy or like the head isn't stable at impact. It actually still feels pretty stable at impact, and that again is testament to there's good quality materials in there. But there's a lot of sensation and movement in the shaft. So anyone sensitive to a little bit of give and a little bit of wobble in the shaft, that's going to feel very, very, very alien. And actually, this is why I'm going to the TPT next, which is actually very slightly lighter at 45 grams. This is the 21 high, is because this is sort of similar in terms of so for TPT, they go through a kind of a number series, which is weight and flex. So do the high and the low series. The low is a more stout tip, a little more tip balanced, and then the high, which this one is kind of more akin to the auto flex. They go a little bit lighter, so you go from 45 grams up to 76 in the high, and I think it's a 57, I think, through to 85 in the low in the driver series. But this one, similar sort of principles. I mean, TPT as a company are thin ply technology. They're a composite company. They've worked in many, many different industries, from aerospace through to nautical, through to cars, through to anything with high-grade composites. One of the things with TPT, it's about they've got a very wide range of materials to choose from, so they're picking the optimum material for the properties that they're looking for from the shaft. They also have a continuous, I'm just going to check a term, make sure I get the terminology right, a continuous fibre press. So they have a single what we call flag of composite. So rather than several different flags, which is a layer of composite kind of layered across one another and wrapped around the shaft, they've got a single flag, and then it's round, round, and round, and round, and round. So you don't get in different directions of ply. So that means for them, that's about efficiency of material, efficiency of how it loads and twists. So you're not getting off-angle twisting. So it keeps it a little bit more stable. So that's one of the principles of TPT and how they've come about their design. So I've gone to the high series simply because it's got that kind of lighter weight element to it, so we get the dead weight down a little bit more. They've gone for, so this is the same as the original red series. It's effectively the logo wasn't visible enough. They wanted something that stood out a little bit more, hence the bright yellow. But underneath it is exactly the same as the red range. They've got the Nitro just launched, which is the stiffer profile, lower spin, and effectively kind of higher load based shaft. So that's just launched as well. But one of the things with the TPT, because of that nature, it's a very, very smooth feeling shaft. Similar kind of noticeability of what I call kind of wobble and movement in the shaft to the auto flex. So a slightly quieter look. Certainly, I think with the auto flex, there's a sensation of the bottom end being a little bit more stout, whereas in this one, in the TPT, you can feel a little bit more of the movement through the lower half, so it doesn't feel like the bottom end is quite as firm. And so for what that tends me to do is to react and just hold the face off a little bit, just because whilst it doesn't do it, and I know it doesn't do it, the tendency for someone like me, I've always tended to miss left historically. Swing changes have got me working it the other way now, but it makes me want to guard against a left miss. So I tend to hold on and steer out of it. So I'll try and keep moving through the flex. Yeah, it's definitely a slightly more responsive feel through impact than the auto flex. That was slightly toe, which has just got it looping a little bit. But certainly, would I call it softer? I wouldn't necessarily call it a softer feel than the auto flex, just that that bottom end of impact has that little bit more sensation of kick rather than necessarily softer. But being a little bit lighter, it might allow a player just to rotate through a little bit faster, generate a little bit more pop through. See, these ones I'm just getting it, the second two got it turning over a little bit more, which has got the spin down a bit more. That spin change is more strike point for me. Those are both just slightly onto the toe side. And I think one of the things to be cautious of if you're going to one of these sort of styles of shots, a very soft flex, if you have a change in plane in the swing, the more you technically pull down or drop round and rotate or get over the top and pull down, the softer the shaft is, as you change those lines around, that head's going to deflect off a little bit more and it's going to create a little bit more rotation, a little bit more torsion. So these sort of shafts suit a very uniform plane swing, a much more kind of one plane move, because if you change a plane, then the head twists and moves around a bit more, and actually you can start to lose strike a little bit more because there's more variation, more drooping and movement within the shaft, so the strike point is going to become a little bit more variable. But in principle, from a feel and using the shaft's point of view, the Autoflex and the TPT have a similar kind of sensation to use, albeit the Autoflex potentially a bit more solid feeling at impact. So next one's the Mitsubishi, the Vanquish in the 4. So this one, in terms of raw weights, the Autoflex is around the 53 gram. The TPT, this one's a 45. This Vanquish in the stiff, I've used that inverted commas, is 48, 49 grams. This one's designed around a totally different feel. So the principle around the Vanquish, they've got an amorphous wire technology. Now, it's a material that's been used in the tipper shafts before to stabilize them, but we've now got it in the butt section. So what the Vanquish is really designed to do is to stabilize. So most of these, by using lightweight, high-grade lightweight materials, the higher grade you go, the thinner the material you can use, so the lighter you can get it, less resin. So you're keeping the quality, the proportion of the quality of materials up in the shaft and the weight down. But most of the lightweight materials are used to increase elasticity and then therefore ball speed. So trying to get as much stretch, load, recovery and energy transfer as possible. So obviously lightweight means in theory more club speed, but most of them are all trying to get as much load and stretch and recovery as possible to get ball speed up. However, the Vanquish does it with a much more stable feel. So that stiffer butt section and the same amorphous wire material in the tip really stabilize this. So weight-wise, not quite as light as the TPT, but a very, very much more stout. I mean, there's movement in there, but there's a much, much more rigid feel to the shaft. So swing weight on this one, just check my notes. This one comes out actually very slightly heavier, D1, and the TPT was D0.5. So very slightly heavier swing weight. It is a bit heavier, dead weight of shaft, so that's part of it. But for a player who wants to go lightweight and retain that feeling of stability all the way through the shaft, this is certainly a series that's going to do that. There's a lot less movement in the shaft. That sort of waggle around, you don't feel like you're leaving the head behind when the handle moves. So this is going to feel a lot tighter through the ball. So it feels like the club stays with you through the shot a lot more. So for anyone who's used to playing a heavier, stouter, profiler shaft, the switch to a lighter shaft, something like this, is going to feel a lot more comfortable. It could end up feeling for players that like that sensation of kick, like you've got to work it a little bit harder, and you might lose a bit of feel, but actually it's a far, far more stable feel through the ball. So it's going to feel like you can attack the shaft a little bit more rather than always having to wait for it to kick through. This one gives me the feel that I can really get through it, put a bit more energy into it and not lose the club head. And you can see from that, that's allowing me to have the confidence to put more speed into it and feel like I know where the face is. It doesn't mean that the others go all over the shop. It's just the sensation suits the feel that I prefer. But to get a shaft at this sort of weight that doesn't feel loose, that really takes some very, very good grade materials, but that's certainly something that you're not going to find in very many shafts at all. So quite a particular design principle from, or design feel characteristic from Mitsubishi with that one. So we then go to the lighter shaft we have on the rack here. So over in the Airburst Cobalt, but in the 39 gram. Now, I mean, to get a shaft, I mean, an average grip is, as we said, is 50 to 55 grams. 20% lighter, the shaft is 20% lighter than the grip. That really, so when we're talking about the importance of grip weight, on a shaft like this, if you're thinking proportions, you change that grip 10 grams, that's 25% of the weight of this shaft. So it's going to have even bigger ramifications on the lighter weight shafts. So to get a shaft this light, again, very, very good grade material. So Oban have, for a number of years now, partnered up with Olympic, who are a top quality graphite manufacturer, and they make fly fishing rods is one of the things they make. And again, if you think the amount of bend and loading and movement in those rods you get without them snapping, that can only be done with ultra high quality materials. So Olympic use their Torreca material, and that's really, it's ultra high modulus, ultra high performance, again all about elasticity, you know, speed, generating that recovery, generating ball speed, and so it's elasticity and strength. But to go down to this sort of weight, I mean, the swing weight drops about a point down to C9, 9.5 with this one, because the shaft weight's dropping down. Again, you're going to get, anytime you get a wall this thin, you're going to get a little bit more loading and movement with the shaft, because again, proportionally the head weight gets that much higher, and therefore the gearing and the loading on the shaft gets a little bit stronger, but there's just less material to cling on. So this one's back more along the lines of the TPT and the Autoflex in terms of the kind of player this is going to suit. If you have lots of change of direction in the swing, that club head is going to start to twist, the shaft's going to droop and load a little bit more, and finding strike points likely to be quite tough. This is very much going to suit a quieter, more uniform plane, quieter move through, almost a sort of, you could argue, a bit more of a dead arm swing. You're looking to get as much speed as possible through the ball and let the club basically minimise any resistance to moving as possible. So it's still, the butt diameter on this shaft is wider. Where they've gone, one of the ways they can get stability in the grip end, which is where a lot of the force goes onto the club, is by going a wider diameter, because that wider diameter puts up a bit more resistance to load. So the grip's going to feel a bit thicker on this shaft. But it is a more stable feeling in the handle end than both the TPT and the Autoflex, so more along the lines of the Mitsubishi under the hands. But with it being quite so light, so for me, I'm just going to overpower the weight and flip that one left all day long. But there's just no resistance to moving it. It's one of those things, it's a real feat of engineering for one. But yeah, it's really designed around just getting minimal resistance. Yeah, and you're going to, any of these shafts, the lighter you go, the head works under a little bit more, it's going to add a little bit of spin. But for a shaft this light, it's still in a fairly stable feel. I mean, it's all relative, but still got quite a crisp feel at impact. So with none of them, you don't get that looseness through the ball with any of them. So again, yes, I've got to pare my swing back to do it, but to get that sort of spin from a shaft of this weight is quite impressive. It's just, these sort of weight shafts suit a very particular swing move. Say if you start to change plane and you have a pull down and across, this sort of shaft is unlikely to provide the best performance for you, but if you're a quieter, more body rotation player, kind of a smoother transition, then there's real potential to use some of these lightweight shafts. So hope that's given you a little bit of an insight into how each of these models vary from one another. There are many more options than there have ever been in this category, but there are going to be certain shaft types that are going to feel more comfortable, and potentially that will allow you to put a bit more confidence through the swing. Obviously different weights and balances will suit certain players as well, so throw that in the mix too. But you can get some quite stable feeling shafts now in the lightweight options, and most importantly they're a bit more robust, so you do have to look after them. Anything this sort of weight, you've got to treat with kid gloves, because the walls are that thin. If they get a knock on them, then they will break. They're only designed to be swung and to be put into a driver head and hit a golf ball with. They are not designed to be leant on. So if you're picking a tee up, it might have looked like I was leaning on it. That was just support. What you do not want to do is you do not want to lean on it to pick a tee up, because you're going to break it. And if you break it doing that, they will not be replaced under warranty. So anything lightweight, any kind of, don't load down on it, don't lean on it. They do need treating with a lot of respect, and they can, as they're very light, they're very expensive, so they'll be very dear to replace.
On a matter of breakages, question from Driving Range King. What are your thoughts on the new driver faces braking paradigm? Or no, is it Noah? There was a breakage this weekend, I believe. Yeah, it was a paradigm face braking, and there was a head switch and stealth.
Interesting enough, stealth, I've not seen. What I have seen with the stealth, and we're from more kind of first gen and second gen at the moment, but that's probably through more balls being hit, is that the whole face plate is coming very slightly loose. So we're not really seeing them break through the middle. You've got 40 layers of composite. There's a James's beagle in one of the shots now who doesn't want to leave. She's sat leaning against Kate, trying to drag her away from the room. Clearly loves Daddy. There we go. Yeah. So the faces on the stealths aren't splitting. When you think they've got 40 layers of composite, there's a lot of layers of composite. It's actually the bond around the outside that's tending to pop. That's what I've seen. And ultimately, they're trying to push face tech so close to the limit that, unfortunately, I think they've got better. I'm seeing less breakages, but they are proportionally, but they are pushing them as close to the limit as possible. So you are going to see some. I think potentially more in fairways and hybrids where they're going thinner on the face. You pinch it against the ground. You're putting, if you've got the ground underneath and the ball on the top and you're squeezing the ball there, that's putting force back into the face or pressure back into the face. And so I think you'd like to see maybe more breakages for fairway and hybrid faces. But I think as the companies look for little gains and try and change up the structures, there are inevitably going to be some knock-on effects of things like the stealth, where the face, the edges of the face and that bond breaks. The one thing I would say, and they would never advertise it, but if you have a reasonable amount of club speed, do not hit range balls or as few range balls as possible with a driver. Those faces are not designed to work with single one-piece range balls because the load into the face is different than a multi-piece construction premium golf ball. So if you're a relatively high-speed player, avoid as many range balls as you can. A few is absolutely fine, but if you hit range ball after range ball after range ball with them, you are more likely to see a breakage than with a premium aftermarket ball.
Mark R, my bad drive is a high spin, around 4,000 RPM, high trajectory cut that robs a lot of distance. What shaft characteristics would best counteract this? Best going shorter and or stiffer?
Ignore the stiffness bit, that won't make any difference, or if it is, it's incredibly minimal. Ultimately, there is the bit that nobody likes to admit, there's probably technique involved in there. And one of the things as fitters that we see day in, day out in the bays here is that if there's a technique that's overriding what the club is doing, so for example, if you're down and across and open-faced, there's pretty much, if that doesn't change, you're very limited about what the club can actually do. So you've got to look at your impact dynamics. And actually as golfers, we've got to be honest with ourselves about what is going to have the biggest effect. We will often say to someone with a driver, say often, it's not kind of 2, 1 in 10, but highlight where a technique enhancement can produce 90% of the potential gain. If you're, for example, I'm not saying you are, but if one is potentially 6 degrees down, 7 out to in and 6 open on the face, you don't stand a cat and hell's chance of getting low spin out of that unless you hit a high toe. So working on those and minimizing off alignment in the swing, that'll go a long way to it. Looking at driver loft, shaft on its own, the bend much difference in the shafts. So
2 seconds, I think sorry guys, I think we've just, our camera's frozen. Let me just refresh our cameras. I look like I'm sucking a sweet, bear with me.
I'll keep talking. So there's certainly a shorter shaft, if you're struggling to, if it's an open face and you're struggling to square it, one of the things that can help is a shorter shaft length, because I'm sure James will let me know when the cameras are back up, but the longer the club gets, the more likely you are to get out of sync with the club. And what tends to happen with that is the club face tends to drop behind and get open. So by short, and that's why a lot of players are better with a 3-wood than a driver, because the shaft's 2.5 inches shorter. So one of the things that can be done is a shorter shaft, because that can help to square the face up. But loft, shaft length are 2 elements. I say bend profile and tip stiffness have very minimal. They can and will make very small differences, but they're not going to be the major factor in it. Either the weight and the balance of the club is out and stopping you delivering the club properly. Number 2, the loft of the club could be too high, and that's going to send the ball up into the air. And number 3, if your technique's poor, then there's not an awful lot that the fitter can do to help that. And I think focusing what's going to make the biggest difference. A technique change is a long-term change, and something that will have years and years and years of benefit. So kind of do take a look at that and see if there's something there that can improve things as well.
Yeah, sorry guys, we've got video camera problems. If we just use that camera up there for the time being, cool. Whilst we're... so we've got 10 minutes left. Let's have a look what we've got. Well, Keith Davis raises a very valid point. Don't know if it's a good moment, but do you have any thoughts on spine aligning, or we SSD Pure, a shaft when fitting, or was it all hype?
No, it's not. It's purely physics of the shaft. It's like anything. You have joins in the shaft. You have with graphite shafts, you've got multiple layers, multiple directions of layer of weave. And the one thing I think over the course of time, there's been criticism of these processes, but you would never drive a car without the tyres wheels balanced. It's a bit like a shopping trolley wheel. If the wheels wobbling, it's going to steer you somewhere you don't want to go. It's exactly the same with the straightness and the uniformity of shafts. And so what spine lining's a manual version of it. SSG Puring, we do that as good as every single club we build, because you're trying to get the properties of the shaft that you've chosen it for. So if you can minimise any offline twisting and bending, offline drooping, steel shafts is a bit like a snooker cue. You roll it on the table and the tip flips. Steel just isn't straight, and composites have more complex constructions to them. So you're just trying to ensure that you give the player, by putting the most stable point target side, that shaft, as it loads and recovers, it's going to recover back onto its most stable plane. You see that across multiple industries, not just in sport and everything. You're trying to find the path of least resistance to get the club face back square. And if you orient the most stable point offline, then the shaft's going to want to orient itself back onto that, and then the face gets offline. And the strike point, the drooping, the consistency of how the shaft performs is less.
But let's not also forget, during a fitting, you're constantly rotating the shaft with the cogs to achieve different face angles and lofts. So curing a shaft is not really relevant.
In the fitting process itself, it's a very difficult one to do because of the multiple positions you're going to put it into. But ultimately, if a shaft works well in the fitting, all Puring doing is structurally getting that shaft in its best possible position. It's not critiquing the shaft, it's not saying a good or a bad shaft, but every shaft has a best position to be installed in. There isn't one 100% uniform shaft out there. So, and once you trim the shaft and you cut it from the butt and the tip end, and you're changing some of the properties of the shaft very slightly, but you're just trying to take out any variable. And so absolutely it has a benefit. It can be tiny in some instances, or you can get some really big variables as well. So it's not something to be kind of written off as an old wives' tale. It is a physical reason for doing it.
Kevin Phillips, can you explain which swing profile would favour Tor V and which would favour S or dollar taper?
They're quite similar shafts in terms of the Tor V. So the KBS Tor V was designed to be the same flight as the KBS Tor, but 10 grams lighter. So the knock-on effect of that is a stiffer tip than the KBS Tor. And so the Tor V is they go from 100 grams to 130, but the standard regular stiffer necks are 100 grams to 120. The dollar taper, in theory, is designed around a slightly lower spin, in theory. Maybe very, very slightly. A slightly different step pattern, slightly kind of softer steps through the shaft. The Tor V is a little bit less tip balanced. Neither are tip balanced, so the Tor V is going to swing a little bit more. If there was a counterbalance steel, they'd be close to it. but the dollar tapers start in the standard ranges, start from 110 and go to 130. The Torvies 100, 120. If one works, the others, if it's at a similar weight, it's going to be comparable. But generally speaking, the Torvie makes it a hair easier to get the toe of the club through, but say still feels quite stable in the tip end. But very, very similar shafts to swing at the same weight.
That concludes all the questions for now.
Right, for now, great.
Let's wrap it up and look forward to Monday.
We're going to be, there are a few other shafts coming in. We just received an extra few demos, so we're going to be adding those in, and I'll do kind of similar kind of reviews. And I will be, I'm not putting off. I will be working on my drive. Once those shafts come in, I'm going to start a primary test on some shafts, and then we'll go into doing a driver test for me.
And then if you're lucky, maybe an iron fitting from me.
You'd say once an iron fitting, yeah. So we'll look forward to getting those in. One of them's the Speedo NX Green. We've got the Nitro range and the TPTs. Obviously just had the Airburst AKs and things, and you saw those last week. I don't think I'm missing anything, but as some other product filters in, we'll always get a look at those. Again, anything you want us to look at, just message us, not necessarily just in today, message us via the channel or email or Instagram. Let us know if there's anything you want us to do. But we will look forward to seeing you on Monday evening.
Yeah, and apologies about the slight video issue. I think it's a signal thing. I think I need to upgrade to optical cables maybe.
I'll leave that to James, beyond my pay grade. But thank you for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday, hopefully at 6 o'clock. Thanks a lot.